Good afternoon, Mr. Amer. Everything is going extremely well. Let me put it this way, Mr. Amer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. So I am constantly occupied. I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
Bishop takes knight's pawn. I'm sorry, Frank, I think you missed it. Queen to bishop 3. Bishop takes queen. Knight takes bishop.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. No Hope, the podcast. I'm Patrick Bradley, joined once again by Adam Steele.
Hey.
This is episode 66, and today is Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Yes. So we've got election meddling still in the news. Well, I guess it's
long election come down. Everyone is like got so hyped up, and now they're just like slowly coming down off the election high.
Right. The Kraken.
And everything's starting to look real nasty around here.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going back for our third count of the votes in Georgia, so that's coming. You know, we did the first count. We did some recount. Although then I heard some people saying, "Well, they didn't really recount or whatever." But,
okay.
I don't. They said it was more like an audit, but you know, I am. You know, I have like the attention span of a gnat, and this election has lost my attention, I think, for the most part.
You have more than the average person, right. But it's still, you know, it's got to fade at some point. That's only healthy to lose interest.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I heard, I was listening to, I've talked about him before. His name's Brandon Tatum, Officer Tatum, the Tatum Report or whatever, which is, I guess it's like because Drudge has apparently become compromised, so the Tatum Report is but he did, you know, I thought he did a really good job with the Breonna Taylor. I really like him. I actually watch him a lot, just the way he talks and the way he presents himself, and it's like flawless. I just at one point it just struck me like, man, like that is so hard. Like he never messes up, and he doesn't. And I've watched him live, you know, live stream. You know, his videos do not come across as heavily edited. You know, even that like kind of quick jump or whatever. But anyway, so I
maybe he prepares for his show. That's like cheating.
Right. I know. Fucking nerd. Yeah. I'm more just right downstream of consciousness here and there and a bunch of links. But anywho, I you know, recently I feel like I've been playing more color analyst. You know what I mean? You're like the play-by-play and I'm sort of.
Yeah. That works. You need both sides of that.
Right. So, you know, but anyway.
Okay, so on the menu today, we got we got some
Officer
like,
Tatum.
a little bit more on go ahead.
Yeah. Just so he basically made the point. Now he obviously thinks that the thing's rigged and they're gonna blow it all up like out of the water, and you know whatever, Trump's gonna win. But he made a point which was, you know, kind of rattling around in my head, and he was like, I mean, this woman is either just like out of her mind or she's actually got evidence. I mean, the stuff she's saying is this isn't just like it's not like Alex Jones. Like this is a like really, really respected lawyer, right? Right. I mean,
and Kat's talking about Sidney Powell, for those of you who may not be familiar. So she was one of this woman. She's a former prosecutor. She was at the press conference just last Thursday or Friday, putting forth some interesting accusations. Yeah. Why don't you bring everyone up to speed on what she was saying happened, Pat?
I mean, I don't really know. I still don't know like how specifics it was or they were, but I mean, she is claiming that Trump won by a landslide, millions of votes. Like there is a fraud to the level of millions of votes, and they have the proof.
Yeah,
that is what she's saying. And so to Officer Tatum's point, it's just like if this isn't true, like, what is going on with this woman? Like, did she just, like, why would she say this? She's just like,
it's an easy grift, Pat. There's a lot of people who will believe almost anything right now, and she gets to trade on her former credibility to sop up some of that lovely cash. Send me some money so we can continue the investigation. It's not going to end. You're going to see emails coming out from Trump and from women like this for the next at least year. So don't, even if you believe this and you're listening to this, don't send these people any money.
I'm pretty sure our listeners aren't coming out of their pockets, but hey, still good to, anyway. Yeah. I mean,
so she's claiming that
but
there was a plot that started in Venezuela under Chavez. So this is like 10 years ago now. Some sort of unholy union between Chavez executives at Dominion. The company makes some voting machines, and maybe some international money people, Soros, something or other. And that they have this weird statement from a woman that had like misspellings in the first sentence, who says she was there and she saw all of this. Now, Sidney Powell went and made these claims at the press conference on Tucker Carlson, okay? And some people were like, wow, saying exactly what you said. She'd have to be really insane unless she had some proof. And
she might be.
Now,
or a grifter.
And who now thinks she's insane? Because on November 22nd, 2 days ago, the White House itself says Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She is not a member of the Trump legal team. She is also not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity, even though she was just in a press conference with us like no more than 48 hours prior to this.
Yeah. What did you say when you sent that to me? I think you just called it a clown show or something.
I said clown show, bunch of losers.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's kind of up there with the Four Seasons thing, except more sort of important, I guess, because this is your main lawyer or second in command lawyer that you just.
I don't know what the command structure is. Yeah. I mean, I know that they were willing to indulge her on this, and she was the one where, like, if you were following this on Twitter, the people who really believed there was a big fraud, like, because she was the one making the really big claims. His other lawyers were doing like the actual work of lawyering, like submitting briefs to actual courts with like sworn statements about people who were intimidated in polling places and like the normal stuff that you'd hear of. And then she came out and she just like kept making promise after promise every couple of days. Like, I've got all this evidence, something about the Kraken. And she everyone was just like, Kraken. Blah, 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 blah. And then they cut her loose, and then she makes like an insane follow-up statement on Twitter, like, I'm still going to search for the truth. Now it's Kraken Unleashed or some, it's just.
She referred to the Kraken again?
Yes, she did. Except she was referring to herself now. It seemed like.
She is see, that's what nobody realized, that she was the actual Kraken.
She was the actual Kraken. She's cracking all right. She's cracked up.
Yeah. So she's Sidney Powell 1. Sidney Powell 1 on Twitter.
Okay.
We the people, or maybe not. I want to make sure this is a man. She's really, I mean, something's going on. Everybody should go look at Sidney Powell 1, her Twitter account. Her
280 tweets in the last hour. Oh, that's just like about her. Never mind.
She's completely lost it. So I'm going to try to paint a picture of her profile picture is her walking behind some gentleman. I don't know if you know who that is, a guy in a red tie. Both of them wearing sunglasses. She's kind of like, her jacket's sort of blowing back in the breeze. And then that's sort of photoshopped in front of the Capitol building, like in DC, with like all this crazy lightning striking.
Oh my goodness.
That's an
I don't
intense
know.
picture. And then her cover photo, or whatever you call that, cover photo, the background thing is We the People. Wow. I don't know. She's retweeting Donald Trump still. Like she's in. She brushed that off. She was not even worried.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
She wants to be let back in. So,
Yeah. Anyway, so I don't know. I mean, I don't.
So that's just basically it's just silly at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's like you can feel free to believe her, but she's not bringing anything. Oh my goodness, she's tweeting also about the metal monolith in the desert of Utah. Like,
what is that? Yeah, what is? I saw a picture of that.
I saw the headline earlier. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it's apparently. This is what I've been talking about. All will be revealed soon. Kraken is here, and she's retweeting a Hill article about like a metal thing they found in the desert. So she's cracked, man. She's just cracked. All right, she's cracked. Let's move on because she's just crazy. So we talked a lot about stuff last time. The one point I'd say, since we're not going to dwell too much on this, but if the fraud was massive, like you wouldn't need to look at very many votes to find that out. I will say that, so the case in Pennsylvania that the Trump campaign brought was like, they reviewed 164,000 votes, and they only brought objections for a little bit over 2,000 of them. And those that they did object to, let's see, over 1,100 were just missing a date or had a partial date, like not missing a signature, nothing wrong with the thing other than that. And the other one was, it was something else that was like fairly trivial, just like not having to do with like that the ballot was fraudulent, just like that it wasn't sealed properly or that there was no date on like the envelope, the security envelope.
Okay.
So it's just silly stuff like that. But I mean, those are actual things you can claim. The rate that they found them at was just between 1% and 2%, which is like kind of exactly what you'd expect rejected ballots if you're just going to like reject like they would under normal years. And then on the basis of like finding just the 2,000 ballots they had a problem with, none of which are presumed to be fraudulent. They wanted the judge to throw out basically all of the mail-in ballots, or like millions of them. And the judge was just like, no, that's insane. So that's what their case in Pennsylvania failed from that. So that's the most recent.
Is there any like pending cases in Pennsylvania? Or
there probably are, because I know they were filing a lot of stuff. But that was one of the more well-known ones that actually had something come out.
I was
so that's go ahead.
I one that I was getting a little bit of. I only kind of bring it up because it's sort of a different source than I feel like we're normally going. I don't know. I doubt anybody's ever heard of Rogue News, but I've been listening to Rogue News for years. They're more of financial, like mostly financial commentary and stuff, and mostly Hispanic guys. It's an interesting crew. But I guess they're on the Trump train. But they have been interviewing a guy that's in Nevada that is apparently like working, with the Republicans or whatever to review stuff. And the most kind of interesting thing that, a lot of like different claims, but one that he made that is like very cut and dry, assuming that what he's even saying holds water. But apparently, like, one of the things is these machines, according to him, he's saying these machines are also able to be used in elections where you have like a weighted voting. Have you ever heard about this? So like where you can pick 1, 2, and 3, where there's like 20 candidates, and so you're able to, and the machine like adds like a weight so your first pick is the highest.
I've heard of different voting systems like that. Yeah.
So apparently one of the things they're trying to show or, expose or whatever is that there are these kind of like fractional votes in this election, which would, raise some concerns as to like, why would everybody's just like a one vote.
Of course, yeah.
So at least it was like something that is very like cut and dry. Like there's no, like you can look through all of them. He's making this statement, and it's a thing they can discover or not discover, about, and I mean, I don't know. Again, then you have to, I guess, show that does this even move the needle? Like, how much did this happen? Is this just like a software glitch? Did somebody have the wrong software in? Where maybe it was set to weight them, but everybody was only picking one thing, so it did some weird scoring thing. I don't know, but anyway, it was just interesting hearing like somebody that is really involved, actually in this stuff and. Seem reasonable, but certainly they think it's a big steal, but anyway, so rogue news, they are pretty interesting too in normal times, financial stuff.
Well, as long as they're focusing on things that, have the capacity to actually be investigated and aren't at odds with like what we already know, then there's like very little wrong with that. It's fine.
Like go look into it as much as you possibly can.
Right.
That's fine.
So I had mentioned last time that one thing that was inconsistent with a lot of the theories of fraud that were being floated was that Trump did perfectly well, like in the cities, and he collapsed in the suburbs. But I didn't give any numbers with that. So I looked at Georgia. So would you agree that like Fulton and DeKalb are kind of like Atlanta proper, and that Cobb and Gwinnett are the suburbs?
Yes. I mean, DeKalb, Fulton, Atlanta is might be a somewhat difficult one. We were surprised at how Democrat DeKalb went, because DeKalb actually does go into the burbs a little bit, and Fulton definitely does as well. Atlanta is very odd. Atlanta has 3 counties in the city, and it's not like a huge city. But yes, more, what did you say? Gwinnett and Cobb, certainly way more suburbs. Gwinnett is 100% suburbs.
Yes. So if we look at, I did a comparison between 2016 and 2020, and Trump's percentage in Fulton was down only 1.1% of what it was in 2016 in Fulton. He was down 0.4% in DeKalb. And then in Cobb, he was down 4.7%, and in Gwinnett, he was down 5%. So that just shows you, like, he did pretty well, like, inside the cities, and in the suburbs is where he lost a ton of support. That's like a lot. That's a big swing.
They, CNN on election night, that was a lot of their narrative. The guy that kept, was working the board, working the map. He brought that up a lot. That he thought that was where Trump was losing it, was in the burbs.
So, and it also, like, if you wanted to guess where it would be relatively easier to commit a fraud, it would be the places where he has less support, because you're going to have less observers, like more friendly poll workers there. And so, like, where he lost support is actually where he has like over 40%, got over 40% of the vote.
Oh,
like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So they don't always count these things like exactly at the same spot, but I mean, it's pretty close. So that's another thing that kind of counts against it. And then, of course, like the really obvious one, which is like they did much better in the House than they were supposed to, and in the Senate. So, like, whatever theory of fraud you want to pose, like, it has to be consistent with the facts that we know, which is that he did perfectly well in the cities where he has like only like token support. And he collapsed in the burbs where he has decent support in 2016. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty convincing argument to me. That I think that really fits with, what I've like seen as well.
Okay.
Have you I haven't like double checked this myself. I've heard it in a number of places, but is it true that also, like, if you just sort of take the U.S. on a whole, the big shift was actually in white male voters away from
That's
Trump?
right. He did better in every demographic than in 2016, except white men.
Yeah.
White men elected Joe Biden. So like whatever your lefty friends want to tell you, it's just like, no, it's the opposite of that.
I can give a little life experience this week, and I don't know. My friend May actually listened to this podcast, but it's a left leaning friend of mine, African American guy. He hit me up, and we haven't talked since like the pandemic started, and he's got a new baby and all this stuff, whatever. But we got together, smoked a cigar, talked about some stuff. It was quite interesting. From his perspective, one of the things I got him on record. I wasn't even trying to get this on record. He just happened to say just explicitly, if it wasn't for Russia, Trump would have lost 2016 election. Like, oh man,
okay,
because we've like theorized that people still think like this.
Oh no, I have. I'll try to dig up while you're talking. I have a great stat on that. So keep going.
Yeah. So, but his, and I mean, I'm obviously just putting words in his mouth, so, and he's not here to defend himself, but it's just interesting, I don't like, I have so much less interaction with people right now where I have like real conversations, and, I think my life in real life is a bit of an echo chamber, or at least more than it normally is, so it's kind of cool to like get somebody completely outside of it, in their own echo chamber, I guess. But it was like,
what did he think that Russia did?
I completely cornered him, and I was like, well, how, like, but how? And then I even, like, he was kind of about to start talking, and I said, be specific.
Yeah.
And he didn't say anything. Yeah, I like literally just sort of clammed up on that. And so it was like, okay, like whatever. I don't know.
I'm sure he's used to talking to people for whom that's like an article of faith. It's like, you don't question that.
Yeah. Well, I'm still not really sure how, I don't know how widespread it is. I mean,
it's very widespread.
Yeah.
So here, let me give you a stat here. Okay. So this is share of voters who said the elections were free and fair. Okay, this is a poll. In 2016, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, taken at some point after the election. I don't know when exactly. Only 43% of Democrats said the election was free and fair, and 72% of Republicans said it was fair. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then in 2020, 91% of Democrats said it was fair, and 30% of Republicans said it was fair. So there's a little bit of motivated reasoning going on here, in case you didn't notice.
I like how both really like slammed to the polls there too. You know what I mean? Like it went from the winning side went from 70% to 90%, and the losing side went from like 40 to 30.
It's not as extreme in the previous elections, but like Barack Obama versus Romney and Barack Obama versus John McCain, this follows the same pattern. Yeah. Whatever side won thinks the election was fair, and whatever side didn't thinks it wasn't. Yeah. So excuse me if, I'm not going to take at face value someone's like stated belief that it wasn't fair based on what? Never mind. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I feel like No Hope's going on record that sure there is, all kinds of shenanigans, but did it move the needle in either election, 2016 or 2020? No, and no. That's our official position.
Yep.
Don't at us.
Don't at us. We won't listen.
Actually, you can. Really, any interaction I would welcome. So please come over and yell at me. But
so that's about all I had on that.
Okay.
But
so continuing with this, but it was interesting. Because he admitted to me that he had been kind of like snooping on my social media activity for a while, and I think he had some concerns, and again, right, like I think that when you really fall into like a binary thinking type of thing, oh man, settings are all messed up here. Here we go. When you sort of suffer this binary thinking, you see me defending or going after some attack of Trump, maybe it's the Russian collusion. And that can, I think, convert into your head that Pat's a racist. You know what I mean? Or Pat's a Trump supporter. And it's crazy, right? Despite the years we've been, I've been friends with him probably more than 10 years. And he didn't come. I mean, it's not like he came out and accused me of anything. And in fact, he obviously cared enough that he wanted to sit down. And I mean, you could tell he was kind of interested and wanted to mix it up anyway. Like, I don't think he's like too worried that I'm joining the KKK or something. But it was very interesting. But if I could like take away one kind of like global, the real thing with Trump, I don't think it's so much that he sees, like, I don't even know that he cares or whatever, that Trump is racist. Like, that's not really the question. Is it's not this one person and what's in their heart. Is he sort of fomenting this divide in the country? And that's what he believes very, very firmly. The funny thing was, though, I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I think that, he is certainly a part of his base, that type of rhetoric, will galvanize him more or something. But I was just, I was like, but I mean, come on, man. Like, you've got like, almost every Hollywood celebrity, every big Fortune 500 company, like all the major media stations, they're all pushing this like Democrat agenda. And I think that it's a very divisive, if not more. And the weird thing was he agreed with, like, he had no problems with that. He's like, oh yeah, that's definitely like race baiting or whatever. Like gave me no pushback. And then he said that he said he called this when Obama was elected. He said, all my friends are so excited. Oh, this is like the new era. The new day is here. And he was just like, nope. He's like, this is just going to make it worse. Like maybe like in the real long run or something. But he was just like, there's going to be a backlash for this. Now, I don't know that I see it as so much just about race. I think that Obama is a lot more than a black guy, to me. He's a lot more complex than that. It's a lot. He did a whole bunch of stuff while he was in office. To me, and and again, I told him, and I was like, look, like, I'm not going to like sit here and tell you what about racism in America. You know what I mean? Obviously, like, you're living through something that I'm not. Like, I don't know what your experience is, but to me, like, but I can, like, I do know a lot of white people, and I just don't feel like they have trouble really wholeheartedly getting behind African Americans in almost any place, and the ones that didn't support Obama, like, I'm not saying those people don't exist. The people that I know, the color of his skin is not, the reason. It's certainly not the reason for me, Yeah. When he got elected, I remember thinking, like, man, like, I don't know that I mean, I guess maybe we had some naive hope about, the Middle East or something, but but I still was like, well, it's cool that, a black guy got elected president. I mean, at least that is, pull one nice thing out of it. You know, even if it's
I don't
symbolic.
care. See, I don't care that it's a black guy who got elected president. I mean, it is good confirmation that the country is not overwhelmingly opposed to that. I mean, that's what's nice about it to me is it's like a degree of confirmation.
Right,
Because
right, yeah.
Before that, your friend could have said, this country will never elect a black guy because 10% of the people are hardcore racists. It's just like you can't get elected to president if that was the case. It's just impossible. There's too many states that are close.
Yeah. I absolutely. Like, I think that you explained it more clearly, like why I thought that was cool. But yes, because it is a confirmation, it sort of takes that away, whatever. It's like the Eagles win in the Super Bowl, nobody can ever shit on us for that anymore. Oh, I mean, Super Bowls we win. It's like, well, we got one. You know what I mean? We're not the all-time like losers. We got one. So it's sort of, sort of similar to that. Anyway, I mean, I don't want to go off on a whole, race in America, but it was very interesting. And while I do have some other, I mean, I say I have this echo chamber, but I actually have a lot of like super liberal friends that I do hang out with on occasion. But I just don't, with them, I don't really talk about it. Like, it's just, this guy, it's much more sort of fun to mix it up. I think he enjoys the game a bit. You know what I mean? Like mental sparring a little bit. So,
well, he might not have the opportunity to do it with anybody else because they're all in the bubble.
His wife, well, and I think largely he's with his wife and his like 6-month-old and like his like 2-year-old or something. Like that. He said it. Yeah, he said he was telling me how many kids do you have?
One.
Okay. Yeah, that is funny. He said, because another friend of ours had a kid during the lockdown, and Greg, I don't want to use his name, sorry. He had a second child, and he was saying how he's like, man, that second child it changes everyeverything. I mean, he said, I like steal 30-minute naps sometimes, and I still get yelled at for it. He said it's just like completely different. It's crazy, but anyway.
I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah. So, Anyway, no, he's doing great. I think he was doing great in Trump's America. I think he'll do great in Biden's America still.
It's probably be fine.
What's left of it? Okay, so that was all you had about the election stuff, right?
So we can talk about Biden now, since you did the lead in there to Biden's COVID plan, or what we can guess from what he said. Before we
get there, I'm still not conceding as far as my steak dinner bet. I've talked to him. There's no way. Like, I'm gonna see what I'm still hoping the Kraken. It's something there. But I don't feel hopeful. But I feel that now it's like inauguration day. Whoever gets inaugurated, is there a possibility that they postpone it?
I mean, I don't think that's allowed by the Constitution, but I'm not enough. I haven't looked into that part enough.
So we could actually just go to war.
He was looking for people. War. Trump was looking for people to delay the certification in the various states, but I think Georgia then went ahead with it. And the guys who he brought in from Michigan to try to convince to do that said no, I think, but I'm not sure what the details are there. So I could be getting some facts wrong.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I'm not buying this dinner.
Election betting odds. So the prediction markets are still at 8%, but people say that's because there's like a lack of liquidity and it's not possible to really make any money at 1% to 99% type bets. So take it for what it's worth. But if you're looking for an excuse not to pay off, you could say that's the reason.
I was watching those odds on election night, and
they were crazy.
I watched them slip, and then it went back to Biden, and that was it. It's never turned back.
No.
They stole it, man. Dominion. They got fractional votes. They're waiting votes. in
They got fractional votes. They've got sea creatures.
Yeah, Venezuelan, communists, whatever. The unholy alliance. What other, what better alliance can you have than an unholy alliance? There's definitely there's not a better alliance for stealing an election. That I can guarantee. No. That's a fact.
That's right.
With that, we'll move on. So the question I had posed, this might have been a couple of weeks ago, I guess just in between, was what might Biden's, treatment of the coronavirus and pandemic and lockdown and stuff look like, after Inauguration Day?
Okay. Well, I can give you first order the quote that they have on their website. So let's read this, and then we can discuss at least what this says, for what it's worth. A decisive public health response that ensures the wide availability of free testing. Emergency paid leave for all those affected by the outbreak. We must spend whatever it takes without delay to meet public health needs and deal with the mounting economic consequences. The federal government must act swiftly and aggressively to help protect and support our families, small businesses, and first responders and caregivers to help us face this challenge, those who are vulnerable, and our broader communities, not blame others or bail out corporations. So we're going to help small businesses, but not corporations. Most small businesses are corporations. We're going to set the groundwork for bold, long-term reforms, including ensuring quality, affordable healthcare and comprehensive paid leave program for every American. So
how many trillions of dollars is that?
Yeah.
That he's talking?
So I took this so it's a lot. And it's obvious from the start that this is a wish list of stuff with the justification of COVID tacked on. Comprehensive paid leave. What does that have to do with COVID? Post-COVID, it doesn't. These pandemics are of course important and serious, but it's not the reason you would implement a paid leave program in perpetuity, requiring businesses to give a degree of paid leave. And first of all, it's testing is already covered. Since March, every single insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and every private insurance plan has been required to cover testing. It's a requirement already. Mm-hmm. And then they passed, in addition, a special Medicaid option, which has been taken up by some states, where even if you don't have any insurance, you can get the special Medicaid coverage for COVID testing. So it's just saying things that are already there, I guess, just because it sounds good. Yeah. And then, of course, the number one bad thing in here is that Biden believes we must spend whatever it takes without delay. That is just...
Spend whatever it takes. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure the corporations won't get that,
Yes.
The big corporations.
I know.
I'm sorry. But yeah, you make a good distinction that... But, there's not a ton of small businesses that aren't incorporated.
Right. There are some LLCs, but it's basically the same thing in terms of what he's talking about. It's I understand, I guess, what he's saying, but the reality is whether you're a small business or a big corporation, if the government says you aren't allowed to bring people into work, the only difference between a small and a large entity is maybe access to the credit facilities.
Yeah.
You can get some more credit, but it's when we're talking about things being closed for weeks and months, there aren't that many corporations that keep such a huge cash cushion on hand.
Right.
Only a few of the really giant corporations can afford to do that. So it's mostly silliness. He has made allusions to a national mask mandate that I don't think the federal government has the authority to do, and then also for a shutdown, which the federal government doesn't have the right to do. And you think he at least sort of acknowledged it by saying, well, I'm going to work with governors. So, your guess is as good as mine what he actually will do. It's not like not having the authority under the Constitution stops them very often. So.
Right. Yeah. So the idea of them, of the stimulus bills to come not lining the pockets of their corporate donors and stuff is complete fantasy.
Yes. It's like when Obama said that the insurance companies were all against Obamacare.
Yeah.
No, sir. You are mandating everyone in the country buy their product. I don't think they're against that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you were on this episode or not, but we talked a little bit about one of the stimulus bills, and we sort of just went through like, okay, this many people are getting a check for this much money, which leaves like 80% of the money left to go to like big corporations.
Yes.
And that was, I would say that was a pretty, that was probably like the small, individual as I've really gotten out of one of these crazy bills, I mean, the 2008 bailouts, there was literally nothing in there for people, right? I mean, it was just like straight up. Here you go.
The PPP was a lot of money for small businesses to cover the payroll, basically, during COVID. And, that did go out. But, I mean, there was a huge amount of fraud, which is now only being uncovered. There was an article today where thousands of inmates in California's penitentiaries applied as fake businesses to get PPP money. A dude put a rap on YouTube about how he got... Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah, you can say no. I don't think
he put a rap on it. I can't remember the line. It was like, people be collecting welfare checks. I just be applying for. Oh man, I can't remember the line. It was pretty funny though.
Yeah. He got like locked up. It's so funny, right? Yeah. They talk about selling drugs all the time, and then he talked about like doing this like PPE fraud. Yeah. He just got immediately locked up. Just like, I guess the paper trail was pretty easy. Like once he identified himself as a target to investigate, it was pretty easy. Like, oh, he doesn't actually have a business. Okay, doesn't have employees.
And then. And this happened a few other places. A guy, I think he got out of the country. He got to Costa Rica or something. But I can tell you from having gone through the process, like it's not that careful. I mean, I think that it would be pretty easy to scam the government out of money if your bank is overwhelmed and they just kind of push your application through.
Yeah.
So it's not that surprising.
Yeah. I'm not, the more I think about it, I mean, so this actually was another thing that came up a bit in the, conversation I had with my buddy, last week. And this was something that he really, that he really thought Trump did a terrible job, with the handling of the coronavirus stuff or whatever. And, as we said, I mean, I'm sure he's made some mistakes or whatever, but I just don't see that, he had this huge impact. I mean, if you want to give him credit for, moving the timeline up a whole lot with the vaccine, that's cool. And to his, but that's like on the positive side. And he was like, oh, well, anybody would do that. I was like, but if your argument is he's incompetent and he's doing what anybody would do, then I still win. I won the argument because you're saying anybody would do that. Well, not a totally incompetent person. Anyway, and I, right.
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, so is Trump uniquely incompetent or isn't he? Yeah. Yes, he is. Okay. Then what about, Belgium, the UK, France, Italy? Like, are these places all governed by people as incompetent as Trump? Because they have body counts that are just as high and in some cases significantly higher, like Belgium. Like nobody's pouring the hate on Belgium. Because no one really knows why Belgium is doing so terribly. Mm-hmm. But it is.
I actually was looking around at some stuff today and had a couple questions in this area. So this is a good lead in. We can start with Belgium. So would you describe Belgium as a country that did have like a pretty strong lockdown policy?
It's disputed how strong their lockdown is. I saw, hold on, wait, I can bring this up. There's a policy response thing, plotter that shows like how strong various countries' lockdown was.
I think you sent this to me.
And there isn't a strong correlation because one of the countries that had some of the strongest now there are countries that had extremely strong lockdowns and very good results, like Australia and New Zealand being good examples of that. But like a place like Chile had an extremely strong lockdown as well, as did Italy. And that's why during the summer, Fauci was going around saying, oh, Italy did such a great job, blah, blah, blah. They really crushed it, this and that and the other thing. And then when it comes back, everyone shrugs their shoulders like, oh, well, never mind. There's no curiosity. There's no desire to be like in any way consistent.
Right. Yeah.
Stay-at-home requirements. Go ahead.
So I was looking at Germany. I mean, Germany had pretty strong lockdowns. I mean,
it did
they
for
have
a time.
like full on like riots and stuff, and so things are back. And and I, just like the simple kind of calculation of where they are at now. I mean, they're, if you just sort of multiply by the difference in population, I mean, I think we're in a pretty similar state right now in the world, the United States and Germany, and people would claim, and remember how funny, how weird Germany was in the beginning. Remember they had no deaths.
Their first wave was substantially less than most of the other peer countries. And now Germany's daily number is above Sweden. It is below ours by, quite a decent amount, like 40% below ours, but it's not zero.
But they have, they have like 80 million people and we have 320 million. And when I multiplied it out, it's something like they would be, if you just, expanded their population at the same rate, they would be roughly around like 1,500 deaths a day. Whereas we're topping 2,000 a little bit right now, according to Worldometers.
I'm looking at Our World in Data. That's the site that I like. I think they have very nice charts, and this is per million people. And United States is at daily deaths of 7-day average of 4.5, and Germany's 2.7. So, I mean, they're definitely below us right now. What else can I say besides that?
It's interesting because that's like completely different than the numbers.
Are you sure you're not talking about cases, or are you talking about deaths?
We have 2,000. The last day reporting, November 24th today, we've got 2,187 in the U.S.
If you're just doing a daily number, it fluctuates a lot over the course of the week. So you have to do like a 7-day rolling average. So I wouldn't look at any number that wasn't average to some extent.
Yeah, we could say, so we're 1,656 was our daily average according to Worldometers.
But anyway, the point is that it's hard to establish a strong connection between government policy and actual outcomes. There is some correlation there for sure, but it is definitely not this like slam dunk, very strong correlation. In the sense that, you could predict how many deaths someone had by, the stringency of their lockdown. Like that isn't a thing.
So I would just real quick, it would be like 933 and we're at 1656. So, pretty substantially different, but not like, I don't know. It's not to me
Germany,
as much
Germany
as you would expect, like from, the caricature of Germany being like the quintessential lockdown, like
sure
we should have like 10-fold more deaths, like
right. If you believe that, right. And if you look at just the cumulative to date, now we're still trending up, but I mean, so is France, so is the UK, so is Italy. But if you look at the cumulative, like Italy, United Kingdom, United States, and France are all sitting together in their total. Belgium is a lot higher and Germany is a lot lower. Okay. So there's a degree of convergence here. So it's like, you don't just want to look at a point in time, because even if you believe like the standard story about lockdowns, you could easily be trading cases now for cases in the future.
Right.
And there's a lot of complexity here, and I could talk for a lot of time, but the real point is that there is no silver bullet here. Masks may work, but they're not a silver bullet by any stretch. Like lockdowns, there's the least evidence of any of these things. And even within lockdown, there's a lot of gradation. Like Sweden never really locked down, forced people in their home, but they did prevent like gatherings of more than 25 or 50 people for a long time. Mm-hmm. But like at the same time, they left retail open and they left schools open, and people were allowed to go to work. So, you have to take a really comprehensive look at all these things to draw a strong conclusion.
And if you look, their second wave, their deaths look like has already rolled over.
Which country are you talking about now?
Sweden.
Yes, that's right.
And they didn't even come close to the first wave.
That's right.
So it's interesting. I had, we had kind of looked at Sweden and some other these cases to say like, oh, we may, need to revisit this idea that once you had the first wave, you sort of, if it was bad enough, you kind of got to herd immunity, and then hopefully you're kind of in the clear. And now seeing somewhat of a second wave in Sweden, it's like, oh, well, we have to rethink this. And what does that mean? I mean, just throw an idea. Well, this is a 7-month delay. Like, does immunity only last 7 months or whatever? But no. I had a friend of mine floated the idea that it could also be a better environment now. Like in the colder weather, it's actually more contagious. So maybe that changes the herd immunity number, and it kind of allows it to get back out. Like it's actually, that calculation is different now, like, because it's more than one person spreads it to 1.2, maybe it's 1.4 when it's cold or whatever. But he really felt strongly that he's like, man, these memory cells are really good. Like the odds of getting, that was, I keep thinking of things from that conversation. That was another thing. My friend like really feels like he won't let go of this idea that like once you get COVID once, you're probably good. Apparently, one of our mutual friends has had COVID twice.
That's very unlikely.
Yeah. I was like, this is like winning the lottery level of a coincidence that we know that. But even still, it is a quintessential anecdote. But anyway.
So talking back on what you said, given that a lot of these European nations had their second wave at about the same time, it does suggest there might be a degree of seasonality. On Sweden, I would say, is that the thing to keep in mind is that this second round of cases weren't in the same location as the first round. So the first wave was very much centered in Stockholm, and the second wave was more in the other parts of the country. So just like if you look at US's chart, it looks very strange compared with a lot of other countries. Mm-hmm. And that's partially because we had very strong outbreaks, but they were regional. Mm-hmm. And a lot of other places are probably experiencing something similar. It is a fact that Italy's second wave is very strong, but it is not centered around the areas like Bergamo, where the first wave really was devastating. So just saying a country has a second wave is like odd, because like viruses don't recognize national boundaries. A country could be like a city state like Singapore, or it could be a giant sprawling thing that's the United States that goes from like Canada down to the tropics. And these are very different things. And you wouldn't necessarily expect to see cases rise and fall over the whole country at the same time, because it's just not well mixed enough.
Yeah. I think the virus moves, but then you have, I guess, the possibility of like drastically different policies as you cross, one, which would actually lead to, probably some of the better data, if you had kind of like two really different, policies right next to each other, which is what they wanted to do with like Sweden and Finland and Norway. But
sure, yeah. and I don't, it's not a totally unfair comparison, but those countries like they are right next to each other, and so it's a fair case to say against Sweden, like maybe they could have done against Norway, but Sweden has an older population. Those countries, like. Yeah. You really want to be careful when you do these comparisons that you're doing it fairly. Like Sweden has like a fairly low population density averaged over the country, but there's a lot of parts of it that are not that are just uninhabited completely. They have a lot of sort of empty territory. So really anybody who's like trying to give you like, here's the summary in 5 minutes is probably not looked at it hard enough. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to solve all the mysteries here.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the vaccines if you want.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I've got a little like kind of a lead in to the vaccine, and we can sort of wrap it up there and end with a bit of hope because I'm feeling a little optimistic in this one tiny sliver of
going off brand there.
Yeah. So. About the seasonality. So with the flu, you have every year different strains, right? You have multiple strains in 1 year, right?
There are multiple strains in 1 year, and from year to year, sometimes one strain is more prevalent and the other is. That's how they need a new vaccine every year, because they sample what's coming around and then they use that to make the vaccine.
And these are like actual mutations, like they're different. Like the 2011 flu is different than the 2012, the 2013.
I don't know any more than I know that there are families that they organize them in. And if you go to like the WHO has like some very nice flu data on their website, they have it broken down every year, like nice bar charts, like the fraction that was one influenza something and the fraction that was influenza something else.
Okay.
I don't know enough about like the way the strains go from year to year to know like, oh, this one's a direct, descendant of this other one.
Right.
They're not new coming in from animals every year. That's I'm pretty sure about. But other than that, I don't know.
Yeah. So I have trouble with the seasonality. Like I have trouble imagining like how it would work, because who's left to get it because it got cold, like once I've got it, I'm immune. We're sort of moving with that assumption. The flu, I feel like the reason you keep getting it is because there's different ones. That's sort of how I was, and it becomes more contagious. So basically, the flu is so seasonal that it's like basically it's just not spreadable in the warm weather, and it only becomes spreadable in the cold weather. But you don't have these long-lived immunities to it. Maybe because of the nature of just how that immunity works, but I think more so because there are different flus. So
that makes sense. I'm not betting the farm on seasonality. I'm just pointing out that it's a plausible theory.
Yeah. I was surprised that he, because this is what he brought up, was that it was cold, but he wasn't really. Because I was thinking like, oh, well, it's not, but it doesn't make sense that it would be seasonal since we had the worst part of the pandemic in the spring, but that wasn't really his point. His point was more that it's just more contagious. Like this is so contagious that
it is a lot more contagious than the flu. Its replication number is like a factor of 3 higher.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's able to propagate even off season. Basically. Yeah. So we could, so it would make sense that I guess it's like it's more, more virile in the cold weather. So that, So anyway, I mean, I'd already sort of made that, put that theory out there that it changes basically the numbers for herd immunity. And so places that once were there weren't. But once they get there, assuming like a relatively static population, they should be fine henceforth. Like next winter, when it gets, more contagious again, it doesn't really matter. And at some point, I would assume it would just sort of go away, right? Like if it can't be spread, it would. So
I don't know. I mean, cold viruses are constantly circulating, and a bunch of them are coronaviruses. We don't know a lot about why kids are less affected, but kids get an average of like 5 to 6 colds a year, and adults it's like 1 or 2, I think, is the average, something like that. And that people are saying that may be the reason why kids, because they haven't been exposed to it in the past. So why are kids less affected by coronavirus? Well, maybe it's because they have more exposure to other coronaviruses. That's kind of a well-known phenomenon of viral interference of one virus interfering with the similar one's ability to propagate.
So
affect the system.
The last piece on this, before we get that, this is setting the table for a vaccine, is another thing that we were talking about in this was that the coronaviruses don't mutate that quickly, or to see another strain, like the expectation isn't like, man, we're going to be dealing with like all these different, like, I don't even know if it would be sensible to call it COVID-19 anymore, but just like mutations of this, like we're dealing with this forever, like the flu. His basic premise was a successful vaccine, assuming we can do it and get enough people to take it, will end this. That was like his message of hope in his opinion.
I don't know enough about it. I think that is probably true, because at least I know for the enteric coronaviruses, for which they have had a vaccine in the past, and they inoculate animals with these. I don't think they give a new one every year. So, but I mean, it's just, you really need an expert to tell you that. I mean, I did read that article very early on from the Australian expert in coronaviruses, and his opinion was that the immunity would last a number of years. So he didn't have an expectation that it would mutate very rapidly, but this is a new thing. So, I mean, it jumped from animals to humans. So it suggests some degree maybe of malleability. Maybe that's one of the things that lets it survive. I also did read that there are different strains of this COVID-19 already. And that was the question was whether or not the one that was circulating in Europe was more deadly than the one they had in China. And I think these are all still like open questions. I don't think anybody knows the answer to them yet.
Yes. I remember them talking about the possibility of multiple strains, but I haven't heard
about that since then. I know.
And that seems like, again, kind of like you sort of saying like, or we talked about last time about kind of the sort of sad kind of bent to research these days, being so politically motivated. I would think that, being able to make the virus more dangerous, that research would be supported. So I tend to assume that it wouldn't, but that's obviously not, good enough to actually close the door. But I don't know. I just feel like if they had found more evidence of this, they would be blasting it out everywhere. No freedom.
I don't know. There's so much going on right now. Maybe those are just waiting in the wings to get into the limelight. I don't understand why certain
magazines with more stuff to shoot at us.
Yeah.
You don't what? What were you saying? I cut you off.
I said it's hard for me to understand why some papers that are really terrible get in the public eye and everybody's talking about them, and other ones that are interesting and seem more relevant don't. It seems like it's just an idiot journalist gets forwarded a paper and is spoon-fed what it means, and whether that's right or wrong, they run with it. And then it's all over the cover of Atlantic Magazine and CNN.com.
So, so what do you want to say about the vaccines?
So the vaccine situation is looking very good. So we've got the first one announced was, I believe, the Pfizer one. and then one from Moderna, and then from AstraZeneca in collaboration with Oxford University. The Pfizer one was the first one to be announced. Everyone was very excited. The challenge there was that it needed these ridiculously cold, like negative 80 degree C refrigerators or something, because it's a live cell culture. It's one of these new type of vaccines. It's a new technology. And I think the Moderna one is as well, but it doesn't require quite as extreme of refrigeration for whatever reason.
Okay.
The AstraZeneca technology is more standard and can do with normal refrigeration. That's another reason why people are excited about it.
Oh, okay.
There's some issues with the AstraZeneca one, which I'll get into. The upshot here is that for all three of these, they claim they can achieve 90% plus efficacy. And the way this is established was for all of these vaccines, the Moderna was given to 30,000 people, the Pfizer 45,000, and the Oxford 23,000 with the asterisk there, which I'll get back to later.
Okay.
And then in those tens of thousands, now this is the only negative part. So Pfizer gave it to 45,000. Only 170 people total out of that 45,000 got COVID. But 162 of those were in the control group and only 8 in the treatment group. So that is how they extracted this 90+% efficacy from those numbers. And then in the Moderna, it was 90 in the placebo and 5 in the treatment group out of 30,000. And it was something similar for the AstraZeneca. There's a problem there with that, as I'll mention, though. So the problem is that these aren't challenge trials, meaning they just giving people this vaccine and then letting them live their lives. And then if they happen to get COVID later, they get it. Now, maybe there are some problems with this, namely that it's possible you're not picking up on, say, like the weak cases, but that's okay. Like if the vaccine gives you maybe a partial immunity such that you have like a very mild or so mild of a case you never find out about it, like I consider that working as well.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about 90%, that should be more than enough to stop the virus like dead in its tracks.
Let me ask you real quick about the numbers. So when you say the case where the 5 and 90, so the placebo 90 of them, those are the numbers that they're using. So they're saying basically 5 versus 90, and that's how they come up with this. And everything else, because you can't really say... You don't, because you don't know who was exposed to it. You just assume, well, we have 20,000 here and I don't know how many get
to first order, that's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had really good data, you would know what the prevalence was, where these people were. But because there's so many people and they're probably spread out over a decent distance, you're not going to want to, like for the masking study that we didn't get a chance to talk about, maybe we will someday, like knowing what the prevalence is very important for figuring out how well masks work. But for this, you just are comparing number of people who got COVID and got the meds versus number got COVID and not. So we're small numbers here of people who actually got it, but the differences are so significant that it looks good. So that's the really good news. The other thing that I'll say looks really good here is they gave these to a lot of people: 30,000, 45,000, and 23,000. The AstraZeneca one, I know, got a hold on it in September because one of the patients had an adverse reaction. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to look at carefully the Moderna or the Pfizer historical results. But assuming that I haven't missed anything major, which I think really should have been reported if it was, we're looking at many tens of thousands of people getting it without any like deaths or severe adverse reactions that have been reported, at least. So if that's the case, then I would say, based on my data, at least for people 40 and above, the vaccine is definitely safer than getting COVID.
Okay.
So insofar as you're someone who is on the fence saying, well, they're really rushing this, like that's all true. But at least insofar as you can trust that we are finding out about the people who have severe reactions, and insofar as you can expect to know about any negative effects within the time frame that we have available to us, a couple months, then the vaccine is safer than COVID.
Okay.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a challenge trial, which is what you'd want if you were really uncertain about whether the vaccine worked at all, like let's say it only was like 50% effective, then it's really hard if you're at low prevalence to even find out if it works. So what you really want is to give people the vaccine and then expose them to COVID.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are unwilling to really do that. So in this case, we find out a lot about the safety, which is good. So given how strong of a result they're getting, and given that they give it to a lot of people, that's both reasons that you should trust the vaccine based on what we know so far.
It's one thing I think about with the, 9. So, okay, let's say the one case or the one run trial where let's say, 30,000 people are given the vaccine. So that means the placebo was given to 30,000 people as well?
Strangely enough, the article I read was not clear whether or not it was 30,000 who were in the trial or 30,000 who got the treatment. So the numbers could be half of what I'm saying.
Okay, but
no less than half.
Yeah, even though 15,000, they gave as many placebos as actual.
Yes,
because so then they can just directly compare these two numbers. I mean, I did see at least. Go ahead. I'm just gonna say, if you don't inherently trust them, which I don't. I think people have cooked numbers for a lot less than the amount of money they're going to make on this. Now I guess you have to think that that's eventually those chickens would come home to roost as they realize that the vaccine wasn't working well. I don't know. But I'd say
there's two more skeptical. I'll bring it. I'll let you finish your point, and then I'll bring up more reasons to be skeptical. I'll help you out here.
Okay. Well, I would just say that, you could, for instance, have the 15,000 placebo people in, regions where there are, outbreaks happening, and the other 15,000 that got the, in a place that already had reached herd immunity or something, and there really wasn't, where that would really throw off the numbers. So I don't know. I would just hope that somebody's looks that well, and that could even happen by accident. I guess. Because
that would be a pretty major screw up. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that would be bad. It's obviously incorrect and wrong, and someone should have noticed that.
Right.
But
these people should live in the same
story in a minute.
Okay. All right.
It's going to make you more suspicious.
Okay. All right. I'm just saying you could do that and then present these, and I mean the superficial nature of media and 99% of the population of the world would never dig into that. And if we saw that and started talking about it, we could easily be branded as conspiracy theorists and just.
But I mean, this data is generally handed over to the approval agencies, so they'd have to be faking the data as well. I admit that when all three of these came out and they were all 90+%, which is quite rare for a vaccine, that seemed odd to me. That Pfizer announced that it had 90%. And then the other two announced Moderna announced within a week, and then the AstraZeneca a week after that. And they were oh, ours is above 92.
Yeah. Didn't Pfizer come back and update their number to be 95? They beat Moderna by
maybe. I don't know. I could easily believe it, but and that's the kind of thing that does give you pause, because there shouldn't be an element of salesmanship here. It should be about you can trust us 100%.
Yeah.
So here are the reasons to not believe what I just said. One is, in general, the people they recruit for these studies are people in good health, who are not old, who don't have any other conditions, and are not taking any other medication. This is a very standard thing for drug trials. And it is a terrible, terrible policy, particularly for most drugs that are given to people who are taking other drugs and have other conditions and are old.
Yeah.
But it is the way it is always done. So insofar as I'm basing my numbers for whether or not it's safe on the risk of COVID stratified by age, you can't necessarily say that this is safe because that number is not like age stratified in any way. Because the people who got this were probably all between 20 and 50 years old at the oldest, I would guess.
Yeah.
So
you're saying, can you actually use this if you are somebody that is taking medications or has underlying conditions or something like that?
And this happened, and it happens all the time with drugs that they're released based on clinical trials that include people who are in perfect health and are taking no other medications, and then they discover a drug interaction. And it has to be taken off the market, or then you say, well, don't give it to someone if they have this other thing. You might think, shouldn't this have been taken care of? No, because those aren't the kinds of things that are checked.
Oh, man.
And then the other thing that should going to set off a little bit of alarm bells is, so the AstraZeneca one, the third one to come out, the top line number is like 70-something% efficacy, which is very reasonable. But the number you're going to see reported is 90%.
Okay.
So 23,000 patients were in the trial. 3,000 of those patients were given the wrong dosage for their first injection. 3,000 of those 23,000.
Okay.
And within that group is the 90% efficacy. So they screwed up the dosage on an experimental medication that they gave to 3,000 people. And are spinning that shit into gold.
Well, are they saying, "Oh, we thought this was the wrong dosage, but is that the dosage they will give, or are they actually gonna?"
Yeah, I mean that's what they want. That's what they want to use going forward. They're saying, "Oh, it's serendipity."
Yeah. So basically,
it's like, I've seen how the sausage is made. Like I know mistakes in the lab lead to results, but
right.
you would think you'd have a pretty rigorous protocol for determining the dose for like a medication that hasn't been out there and is like new and experimental.
Right. Yeah.
But you would be wrong.
You'd be a fool.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Just go with whatever your gut says. We'll use that. Yeah, that's interesting. So really, they did a trial with 3,000 people.
If you hear the number 90%, it's a trial with 3,000 people. But the dosage that they gave, the wrong dosage, was lower, not higher. So, it's better. It's better for in terms of like the safety and stuff. Less is better always.
Right.
So,
yeah. Do you want to talk at all about the it's fine if you just don't have really anything to say about this, but there is some general fears about this type of vaccination. From what I understand, they're basically taking a piece of like some of the proteins that are, I think they call them sometimes spike proteins, but basically the proteins that are the corona. And that is all you're getting injected with. Like you're not actually getting injected with the virus. You're getting injected with this piece that do spike into your cells. Your cells don't like that. They fight it off. And then they remember this thing, theoretically, so that when a real coronavirus, a full-fledged one comes, he tries to use the same signature of spike proteins and they are sniffed out quickly and they are attacked and eradicated. Is that your understanding of like the basic, like very high level way that this is supposed to work?
I read something similar to that, but can't add anything intelligent. I know it has something to do with the spike protein, and I don't know anything more than that. And I don't know anything more about this new vaccine technology. Like, what are the risks and the benefits? Other than it's new and it requires this much harder to do, like harder transport because of the extremely low temperatures you need to keep it at. That's all I know about it. And then like the numbers from the trial. So no, I can't help.
Yeah. And I honestly haven't, really looked into that. I mean, these fears tend to come from more of the hard conspiracy side of my life and those sources. But I've also been hearing them for a while. But yeah, sorry, I can't really, I don't know if any of that ilk are listening. I wish we could quell those fears or at least say something.
But I mean,
about them.
we're not going to be able to do that from the scientific side. Like the proof is really in the trials. Like they have to either be faking the trial data or hiding the people that got sick, or it's safe.
Yeah.
One of those three things is true.
Or maybe it's a very subtle thing that plays out over a long, long time.
I gave that caveat at the beginning too. We only can be sure insofar as we have things. So one thing to look at would be in that vaccine that was rushed out in the 70s, which there was like a pretty bad adverse reaction and made them stop giving it to people. What was the time frame over what something like that developed? But then you really got to talk to someone who's familiar with the technologies. Yeah. But like for a new technology, I don't necessarily expect them to know. Now, I do think they've been giving this stuff to animals for a lot longer than they've been giving it to humans. So, there's probably some idea, and all I can say is I think it's very unlikely that they're faking the trial data. Mm-hmm. And so it's really this, like, whether there is some long-term complication is really like the only thing that you would have to be worried about. And so the longer you wait to do it, and it will be some time, the longer we're going to have, because they're going to start giving this to a lot of people by the end of the year. Like all the first responders and stuff are going to start getting this pretty soon by the end of the year. And the coronavirus is very, very dangerous to old people. So, and they don't have to worry as much about these really long, like multi-year consequences either. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very strongly the case that unless the side effects are much worse in the older population, which is a possibility, it is a good idea to start moving this through the system now and getting this out to people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm landing right now. It is disappointing though that they're not running trials on an older population. We
do that in the field.
Yeah, that makes me nervous because it's also not really going to happen when you're getting the first responders and stuff. You don't have like 80-year-old nurses getting and police officers and stuff. So I worry about my mom, my stepdad. They're 76 and 78, and my stepdad is about to go into another treatment for bladder cancer. So he's got real conditions that while not respiratory, I can't imagine his body is nearly at the usual strength for fighting things off.
Yeah, I mean, if he's got chemo, he's doing chemo or some of these cancer therapies, they suppress the immune system for those, I think. So it's not going to work that well maybe in those folks. Yeah,
so they are skipping Thanksgiving. I'm going to go up to PA, so I'll be subjected to that, authoritarian state that they have going, not like the freedom that we're loving in Georgia. But I'm gonna probably get my first COVID test tomorrow. You're supposed to get it before you go in. So I've never done that.
I was going to, because I'm going also to see family from New Jersey, and they wouldn't give it to me. Oh, it's like we're 9 months in, and I went on CVS's website. They're like, "Come in for COVID." I'm just like, "Okay, I want the test. Do you have any of these symptoms?" No. And they were like, "You don't qualify." I was like, "I don't qualify. I just want to get a test."
I don't know. Wait, oh my God, that's crazy. Anyway, it's like
people were in line for 6 hours in New York City, and they're not going to get their test back until after. You're not going to get your test back until after Thanksgiving. You might as well not even do it at this point, because all the labs are totally backlogged because for some boneheaded reason they didn't plan ahead, and some of the places don't have this time to do it, and some of them are running out of supplies. Yeah, it's like we're 9 months into this, and it's still like it's the first week.
Yeah. Well, we do have rapid tests places here in Atlanta. I don't know if they're getting swamped, but those will give you back, within hours or even less.
The rapid tests are good, and I'll tell you what, they're going to have a pretty high false positive rates. They have a relatively low positive predictive power for the prevalences that you have in Atlanta. So if you get it, let me know, and I'll tell you what the likelihood is that you actually have it, even if it comes back positive.
Awesome. Well, I can't. If it comes back positive, I've got to suppress that because they won't let me travel into Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well, you signal, and I'll tell you what the.
Yeah, I'll just have to go get another test, but it doesn't matter because if you don't have a test when you get in the PA, you just have to quarantine, which basically means I'm just going to go to my brother's house, which I was going to do anyway because it's where the turkey is going to be located. So, I'll watch that. There's a big fight this weekend. I mean, it's kind of a weird one, a boxing match that I'll also be watching this weekend, and then Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. This is two kind of. They're coming out of retirement and they're fighting on Saturday. So it's going to be pay-per-view. Amazing. I imagine these numbers are going to be pretty high. I know for me, it'll. They look like they've been tracking their training and stuff, and they look like Tyson looks like a total animal right now. They're amazing shape. These guys are in their 50s, man. Just
Tyson's great.
Terrifying. He seems like he's been on a very fascinating mind walk of a life in his 40s and 50s. I mean, I love Mike Tyson. Anyway, so all right. Well, I remember early advice that you gave. Well, maybe I won't classify as advice, but a comment you made is you probably won't be taking the first batch of the vaccine. Remember you saying? How do you feel now? I mean, I guess we're not, right? We're not first responders, so it's sort of the way it's set up.
We're not going to, but I feel much more comfortable seeing how many people have already been in these trials.
Yeah. So cool. Well, so I talked to Adam at the beginning or before we started recording, and I think this is going to be the last episode of No Hope the podcast. I'm not saying that I'll never be back or we'll never be back and never do anything again. Maybe it will just be a bit of a hiatus, but I feel like I've been kind of losing steam a bit. It's been feeling a bit more like a chore. We said I talked about it a bit last week too, so this might not be a big surprise, but the Trump going away is probably gonna really. I just think it'd be a lot more boring to talk about Biden, so that may may also change things. And I'm not sure what the future holds, but don't expect any more No Hope the podcast episodes. I think if eventually something else does come out, maybe we'll brand it different, maybe come in a new medium. I have this camera that I barely use. I've done a couple episodes with it, but anyways, this is our swan song.
Hiatus. We'll just call it a hiatus for now.
Yeah. But I feel like we really got somewhere though. In 66 episodes, there's finally hope. Like we're saying,
yes,
we did it. I mean, maybe that's also part of it. We just had to get here. Found
hope.
Yeah. Hope found. Maybe that'll be our new thing later. But I imagine I'm gonna we'll at least go through the holidays and stuff, and then recharge and see how things are going. It'll give me a chance to focus on finishing the album, PB LaRue's album called Grace. It'll be coming out eventually. I've got three singles out on Spotify, and I think my next thing will probably be the full album, but but yeah, that's it. I don't know, Adam, you gonna say anything to
I hope people enjoyed it. I hope you learned a few things. I hope you feel better about COVID now than you did when we first started doing this. So
Yeah.
Good luck out there, everyone. I think it'll be a great next year.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Take it easy and, I don't know, fuck the government.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.